make some people fat.
Right now, it's estimated that 1 in 3 of us is fat, and by the age of 60, half of us are overweight. To try and beat our weight problems, some of us turn to rather desperate solutions. Trying to lose weight quickly by fair means or foul is no answer. But sensible, regular exercise does help, as I'll be finding out later.
Now, these are just some of the fashionable ways to lose weight and attain the body beautiful. It's pretty big business these days because so many of us want to lose weight. And every year, books like these get published, giving us advice on how to lose weight. Now, wonder what sort of tempting foods that these diets are going to give us if we follow them. Well, let's start off with the millionaire's diet. A little smoked salmon, a little Norwegian caviar it is, this orange stuff, and some nice dry white wine. Chablis. I wouldn't mind losing weight on that diet, but I don't think many of us could afford it. Now, here's the well-publicised Beverly Hills diet, mainly made up of exotic fruit like pineapple and mango. But you can get a bit bored with the taste of pineapple, not mind the taste of mangoes after a day or two. Here we have a much more masochistic diet, a traditional diet, very popular in the 60s and 70s. I think most of us have had a go at it at some time or other, restricting the number of calories we eat. But it's not really very appetizing. You end up with as appetizing a plateful as that. Here we have the new Cambridge diet. It essentially consists of powder that's made up into drinks like this. Pretty fierce. There's only 330 calories a day. Then we have the egg diet. Nine eggs a day, and a little cheese and a little meat. You also have to restrict fluids, and this really is an unhealthy diet. I mean, there's far too much cholesterol in it, and restricting fluids is not a good idea unless you're restricting alcoholic fluids. A diet not to be recommended. Then we have these strange things that are called meal replacements. A couple of orange creams here, some muesli biscuits, carefully designed to provide you with just 200 calories in each, but it's not really a meal. I mean, it's not replacing what I would call a meal. I prefer to take my 200 calories in this form here, baked potato, apple, bit of salad, and wash it down with some nice, refreshing mineral water. Cheers.
They all say they're low fat.
Really? Well, don't worry too much about the calories. Just if you have the plain yogurt, the low fat, I think you'll find that we don't really count calories as such with Weight Watchers.
When you say...
As a nation, we're constantly trying new ways to slim down. But is typical dieting the right way to fight fat? Food writer Geoffrey Cannon thinks not. Geoffrey, you've written a book called Dieting Makes You Fat, which is a good eye-catching title, but how do you justify it?
Well, I used to diet a lot, and I used to believe that when the diets fail, it was my fault. Or let me be more precise. Of course, what happens when you diet is you lose weight, and the diet books and the diet doctors lead you to believe that that's to their credit. And then you regain weight, and over the years become paunchier, and you're led to believe that that's your fault. I always had a sneaking suspicion that that might not be true, so what I did was to do a lot of reading and talk to a lot of people who know, for example, about exercise physiology. And the reason I went to exercise physiologists is that until recently, the experts on the fat and the experts on the fit were completely different sets of experts, whereas now they tend to share their knowledge. And what I found out was a number of things which led to that title. First of all, the very attractive initial weight loss is not a fat at all. People now, I think, have latched onto the idea that it's water, and that's not entirely true. It is water, but it's also water bound up with a substance that you never see in the index of a diet book, because it would be bad for sales, a substance called glycogen, which is a form of carbohydrate, the body's immediately available source of energy, which gets released very quickly. Losing glycogen bound up with water is why it's possible to lose 10 pounds running half a marathon on a hot day, for example. So this initial, very gratifying weight loss has got nothing whatever to do with fat. I mean, you like to think it's fat, of course, because that's what you're trying to lose, but it's not fat. There again, people concerned with animal husbandry know that if you want to make a pig fat for market, what you do is starve it. And you get a rebound effect whereby the animal gains fat, and gains fat rather more in proportion than you would expect. And this is exactly what happens when sedentary people continually go on diet cycles. What happens effectively is their body adapts to the uses to which it's put, or in the case of sedentary people, not put, so that you will lose fat, sure, but also lean tissue, and you will tend to regain rather less lean tissue because the body doesn't use it, and rather more fat. So every time you end up just a little bit more flabby than you were.
It's only in the past 15 years that scientists have been trying to find out what makes us fat. Various theories have been put forward. One theory was that fat people were overfed as babies. Another, that they have less brown adipose tissue than thin people and so burn up fewer calories. Another idea was that people with larger fat cells tend to be overweight. But scientific research into what makes us fat hasn't yet come up with definite answers. But as a nation, we are fatter than we've ever been, and all this extra poundage is damaging not only to our morale, but also to our health. Nutrition expert Professor Philip James.
Well, we know that overweight carries a lot of risks, but of course the more overweight you are, the greater the risk. So that if I'm, for example, 20 pounds overweight, then I know that my risk of heart attack, high blood pressure, diabetes, even gallstones, arthritis, a host of problems start coming at that level. And the question is, does it matter if I'm 5 pounds overweight? Does that increase my risk of heart attack? Well, we know that it's far more important to ask the question, do I smoke? Which I don't. To smoke is a real problem, even if one's of normal weight. If I have higher blood pressure than normal, that's a problem. So we have to begin to look at the different parts of our health. Nevertheless, for the population as a whole, if we tend to be too fat, then we start stacking up the risks that we have to think about.
If we're not to get fat, our energy input must equal our energy output. Energy output is determined by our metabolic rate, the energy we burn up just staying alive, plus the calories we use in activity. Staying slim means eating only as many calories as we burn up. Clearly, many of us are missing the mark. Geoffrey Cannon again.
So many women in Western societies, including Britain, are brought up to fear food and fear their bodies, to fear that if they satisfy their appetites, they're going to become like the Michelin woman. And that's what their experience tends to show them, because, of course, so much of the food we eat nowadays is highly processed and is empty, non-nutritious calories.
We're eating more manufactured and takeaway food than ever. 70% of the food we buy is processed food. And this tends to be low in fiber, high in fat, especially saturated fat, and high in sugar, qualities which load it with calories compared with fresh, unprocessed food. At present, the nation gets more than half its daily calories from sugar and fat alone. One man who's taken a keen interest in what can be found in our supermarkets is food writer and biologist Colin Tudge. He's also the author of the BBC book of this series.
Well, I think the interesting thing is that it's easier now, far easier, to take in huge numbers of calories than ever before in the history of the world. And the food processors really aren't helping in this, because the kind of stuff you buy in the supermarket is almost designed to make you eat huge numbers of calories. And there are really several reasons for this. Well, the two main things are, firstly, that the food is extremely concentrated, so unit weight is very, very high in calories. And secondly, it's designed effectively to be addictive, so you actually eat more and more and more and more and more, so that you're eating huge amounts of stuff that is concentrated in calories. And the fundamental reason why it's so concentrated in calories is because it's very, very high in sugar, on the one hand, and very, very high in fat. And there are very obvious reasons for that, and one is that what the food processors are looking for is a long shelf life, is one of the things they're looking for, and both these things are excellent preservatives. They're also looking for things that people like, very palatable, obviously, and are also, in a way, addictive, and both these things are addictive. And they're also looking for ways of effectively making flavour easily and making texture easily, and both sugar and fat. You've only got to throw them in, you've effectively got something quite nice, you really don't have to think about it very much. So inevitably, if you look around any of these things, they all look very, very different. It looks as if there's a tremendous choice. But if you look at the list of the ingredients on the back, you'll find white flour very near the top of the list. You'll almost certainly find fat in various forms near the top of the list of the ingredients. Then you'll find salt, and then you'll find water, and then you'll find other additives. So the net result of all the processors' fine efforts is to produce food that, ounce for ounce, is far more calorific than food could ever have been in a natural state. Because food in a natural state, certainly if it's plant food, is very, very fibrous and very, very high in water. And so the number of calories per ounce or per unit volume is really quite low, which is the case, for example, in a potato or a carrot or indeed in wholemeal bread. Now, there are some very enterprising food processors around nowadays who have cottoned on to the idea that we really ought to be eating a high-fibre diet. So they've produced these nice little high-fibre biscuits, and they are high-fibre. They've got oats in, and they've got added bran and all sorts. But the idea of eating a high-fibre diet is you eat that instead of fat and sugar, not as well as. Now, what these bars contain is fibre, as it were, embedded in fat and sugar, like flies in amber. And ounce for ounce, we find that this is hugely concentrated. In fact, this little tiny piece, which you could pop into your mouth with no trouble at all, contains just as many calories as this entire apple.
Sugar is, of course, found naturally in foods like apples. But what's important to our health and to our weight control is the rate at which our body absorbs the sugar we eat. And that depends not only on the amount of sugar in a food, but the amount of fibre that comes with it. Here at the Bristol Royal Infirmary, a team of researchers led by Dr. Ken Heaton has devised an experiment which tests the way the body reacts to fibre and sugar.
Thank you very much.
I was given a plate of apples, the same amount of apple in pureed form, and the same again as apple juice. Blood tests showed that when I ate an apple, the sugar in it, which is not refined, that is not separated from its natural fibre, took much longer to enter my bloodstream. Dr. Heaton explains.
Now, blood sugar rises when you eat food, and that's right and proper that it should, but it should come down again and then stabilise off at the original level. Now, that's exactly what it did with the apple meal. However, with the juice meal, instead of stabilising off at the original level, it went on plunging downwards to reach abnormally low levels which we call reactive hypoglycemia or rebound hypoglycemia.
What's the harm in that?
Well, there could be various problems with that. One is that you feel hungry when your blood sugar drops, so you're liable to go and eat again more quickly than you would otherwise have done. The other thing is that you can actually feel unwell. You can feel, get a headache or feel a bit muzzy in the head, and certainly perform less well at intellectual or other tasks. So hypoglycemia is not a good thing to have.
And there's one more point. While all the apple meals had the same calories, they didn't have the same fill-up effect. After struggling through all the unprocessed raw apples, I was certainly full up. But after drinking the juice, I still felt hungry. And that was because all the filling fibre had been processed out to make the juice. When dieting first came into vogue, no attention was paid to the fill-up effect of starchy foods like apples, wholemeal bread, pasta and potatoes. If you were hungry, that was the price to be paid for beating the Battle of the Bulge.
51, 41 and a half, 52, and that added up to 16 stone. Something, she decided, had got to be done.
And what dieters like her were most likely to do was follow these guidelines. Cut carbohydrate and all would be lost. And that included complex carbohydrates, the starchy foods we now know are filling, not fattening, unless eaten with fats or sugar. On dieters' blacklists, lumped in with high-fat and high-sugar foods like cakes, was bread. The emphasis was always on getting enough protein. In some women's magazines, carbohydrates were considered positively dangerous. Many of us still think bread and potatoes are fattening, but it's cutting out bulky foods like these and eating processed food with no fibre that's helping us to put on fat. Fibre expert Dr. Dennis Burkitt explains why.
Western food predisposes to obesity partly because taking out the fibre gives the food what we call a greater energy density. In a high fibre food, you've got to eat a lot to get a lot of energy, and your stomach is full before you've overeaten. That's one of the factors. It takes much longer to eat fibrous food than if it's all refined. It's absorbed far quicker from the gut. Now, there will be other factors. There are genetic factors and other factors, but one of the factors, at least, behind obesity, we believe to be the fact that taking fibre out of the food tends to make people overeat.
With food like this, we consume more calories in each mouthful than we would with fibre-rich food. Our bodies can't count calories. They only know when we feel full. The proof of that lies in the eating.
Are you ready? Go!
How much could 3 hungry people eat of different foods until they felt full? 1 plateful high in fat and sugar, 1 high in fat, and 1 low in sugar and fat, but high in fibre.
Well, your time is up now. So stop eating. Let's see what they've eaten. Contestant 1, I see, has polished off, 10 biscuits, so that's 800 calories. Mm-hmm. 10 sausages, so that's, 1,200 calories, right?
That's right.
And here, 3 potatoes, some salad, and an apple, and that works out, 470, 480 calories. What's the significance of that different weight of eating that they've...
Well, it's obviously an astonishing difference in the number of calories they've managed to stack in, and it's clear that if you have chocolate biscuits or sausages, it's very simple to stack in hundreds of calories from sugar and fat. It just slides down easily. The question is whether this good lady, contestant 3, is satisfied, and I would guess that she feels just as satisfied as the other 2 contestants. So it isn't simply a question of calories and stacking yourself full. She can be perfectly full on the baked potatoes, the salad, and the apple. And the problem is the vast amount that you can slide down if you have foods that are packed with sugar and fat.
But of course, this was a contest, and nobody's going to eat 10 sausages, even 5 sausages, are they?
No, that's absolutely true. But just imagine having 4 or 5 different foods with a lot of sugar and fat in it. It's terribly easy. I would guess they'd actually eat rather more under those circumstances than they managed with a single food.
What sort of foods are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about cakes, other pork pies, other fatty foods. And you can have a whole variety of luncheon meats, for example. It's very easy, once you've got a bit of variety, to stack in an enormous number of calories without realizing it.
contestant number 3 has a lot of fibre and starch in that diet. Is that significant?
The strange thing is people don't realise that it's much more difficult to put fat on if you eat starch than if you eat fat, for example. The fat slides in, costs almost nothing to stoke it away and produce that pot belly, which we now know is so dangerous. And whereas starch, you need 5 times as many calories just to build that fat from starch as from fat. So give me the starch any day.
If you want to keep your weight under control?
If you want to keep your weight under control, eat starchy foods.
Whatever we eat, the body stores excess food as fat. But the body has to use quite a lot of energy to convert starchy food into body fat. It's much easier for the body to convert fat on our plates to fat on our bodies. But whatever food we eat, don't some of us put on fat more easily?
Well, I think we now recognise that if you come from a fat family, then you're in particular difficulty because for some strange reason that we don't understand yet, people really are much more sensitive to getting fat. But the problem in Britain now is that given all the foods, the different types of rich foods that we eat and the lack of exercise, it's even the average person who's tending to get overweight. So it's not just the funny, odd people that we have to worry about with their peculiar problems. It's the ordinary person in the street.
Professor James helped formulate 2 of the latest reports on how to reduce Britain's weight problem. The Coma report said diets rich in fat and sugar with little fibre encourage weight gain. The Royal College of Physicians report on obesity said foods rich in fat and sugar need to be restricted, and that food manufacturers should be encouraged to reduce the fat and sugar content of a wide range of manufactured foods. Finally, this report recommended that all adults should remain physically active throughout life.
And most adults in Britain today, including occasionally myself, are physically inactive. We spend a lot of our time in cars and on public transport, and we use gadgets like this, the remote controller for my television set, which saves me a walk of maybe 3 or at the most 4 yards. Now, gadgets like this are not only labour-saving, they're also calorie-saving, and with the coming of modern technology, we're just burning up fewer calories.
What people should do is to get back into what's known as a higher energy balance. I mean, it's established that people consumed something like 700 more calories a day 3 generations ago. And this is simply because they didn't live in centrally heated houses, they didn't use electric carving knives, the car was rare, and so forth. And it's a question of getting back into that kind of state, which you can do, of course, by giving up the modern conveniences, which I certainly wouldn't do, like cars and lifts and so forth. Or alternatively, you can spend a couple of hours a week in vigorous exercise. And if you're...
Such as?
Well, if you're starting off, say, over 40, 45 and unfit, then brisk walking is excellent exercise. It's very much a question of exercise that you can keep up for quite a long time, say half an hour or more.
Half an hour's cycling or swimming are equally good. But Oxford biochemist Dr. Eric Newsholme most enjoys jogging around Merton College. He was once a 17-stone fatty, but lost weight and now keeps it at the right level with regular exercise and a high-fibre, low-fat, low-sugar eating pattern. He has studied the way exercise affects the body and believes it can permanently increase our metabolic rate, so increasing the calories we burn up just to stay alive.
Well, the most important thing that exercise will do in relation to control of body weight is to increase the rate of metabolism. This is the increased rate at which you use fuels, in which you oxidize fuels. The body stores most of its fuel in the form of fat. This is the most efficient way of storing energy. It's primarily there to provide a store for starvation, so that if we had to starve for a long period of time, we would rely on our fat fuels. But of course, very few of us these days actually starve for any length of time, so the fat doesn't normally get used. Now, sustained exercise, endurance exercise, is one way of using that fat. There's never any doubt, I think, that fat will be used in sustained exercise, and we're talking about exercise for more than about 30 minutes, 40 minutes maybe. There's no doubt that fat is used under those conditions, but what's come out of very recent studies is that after the exercise is finished, the rate of metabolism, the ability to burn fuels, is maintained higher than it would have been had you not exercised.
We know that exercise also makes us fitter and tones up muscle, which makes us look slimmer. But there are also, Dr. Newshome believes, unseen effects inside the body. Exercise can help keep our metabolism from getting sluggish and so prevent us putting on fat as we approach middle age.
Now, it seems as we get older that we lose some of that precision of our control mechanisms. The evidence is that young people are very efficient at controlling their metabolism. But as we approach middle age, we become a little less efficient at doing that, and we think some of that inefficiency causes problems as we get into middle age. Now, the evidence that we have at the moment in one or two areas of metabolism is there is no doubt that physical training, that sustained activity, regular exercise, if you like, improves the control mechanisms. It trains the biochemistry of the control mechanisms.
Dr. Newshome also believes that if you want to lose body fat, going on a short-term diet without taking regular exercise can be self-defeating.
The problem of dieting itself, which I know to my own cost, is it not only is it difficult to stick to a diet because there's all the temptations of food, the difficulty is as soon as you restrict your intake, your problem then is the metabolic rate. The body senses that you're taking in less energy and reduces its metabolic rate. And consequently, you are simply burning less energy and making it much harder for yourself to lose weight. So the attraction of exercise plus diet is, of course, that you're reducing your energy intake and you're increasing your energy output. And if you take that as part of an equation, it must mean you lose weight.
Now, if we want to keep our body fat within healthy limits, the answer is not to go on a diet. If you go on a diet, you tend to come off a diet and go back to your unhealthy way of eating. The answer is to try and change your whole style of living, to change your style of eating, to take more exercise, to eat less fat, to eat less processed food, to eat more fibre. Now, right through this series, we've been getting the same sort of expert dietary advice on how to avoid killer diseases: less fat, less sugar, more fibre. And if we were to follow this advice, and it's not difficult advice to follow because it produces pleasurable eating, if we were to follow it, not only would Britons lose tons of fat, but Britain itself might lose its position as one of the unhealthiest countries in the Western world.
You may like to know that the BBC book mentioned in the programme, written by journalist Colin Tudge and called The Food Connection, will be published next month. And Dr. Michael O'Donnell writes more about foods and our attitudes to it in the latest edition of The Listener magazine, published today.
This autumn on 2, enjoy The Taste of Health, presented by Judith Hare.
Recent reports have told us to reduce saturated fats, but what should we use instead of butter, lard, cheese and red meat? It may seem very daunting to try and change dietary habits of a lifetime, but in fact, as our series will show, it's easy to cook creative, non-cranky food. And 15 of the most interesting cooks will show us how in their own kitchens. Buon appetito.
Buon appetito.
The Taste of Health starts next Thursday at 7:35 on BBC Two.